All right, today we're jumping into a text that really goes after the very foundation of evolutionary theory. It's a perspective that's going to ask us to kind of step back and reconsider what we think we know about the line between science and belief. Okay, so let's just dive right in. The author doesn't waste any time. They put their main point right here, front and center. And this one statement, it really sets the stage for the entire argument. It draws this really clear line in the sand between evolution as a scientific claim and evolution as a matter of belief. So, how exactly does the source justify a claim that bold? Well, let's unpack this argument that the theory of evolution has, and I'm quoting here, collapsed. The text really builds its case on two key points. First up, we have the fossil record. But here's the twist. The argument isn't about the fossils we have found. No, it's all about what the source claims is critically, and I mean critically, missing. So the argument is pretty straightforward. It says, look, we've got fossils of all sorts of different species, sure, but where are the transitional ones? The in-between forms, the ones that are supposed to show a creature halfway between one species and the next. The author argues that if evolution was real, the world would be full of these fossils. But according to this text, they just aren't there. And this right here really drives home just how certain the author is. They're not saying these fossils are rare or hard to find. They're saying the number is 0, a big fat 0. And from that perspective, if you can't find a single one, well, the whole theory falls apart. Okay, so that's the first pillar of the argument, the supposed gaps in the past. Now let's switch gears and look at the present. The second big point is all about this idea that, hey, shouldn't we be able to see evolution happening right now? The logic being presented goes something like this. If this process has been chugging along for hundreds of millions of years, why would it just suddenly stop? It's seen as this continuous, unbroken chain of events. So logically, we should be able to spot it happening in the world around us today. And the author just puts it out there with this direct, pretty powerful rhetorical question. It's meant to make you think. Yeah, it does seem kind of weird to believe that a process this ancient would just, poof, stop. So the core of this argument is the claim that even with all our amazing modern science and technology, we have never actually seen one creature transforming into another. The author says, hey, if evolution were still happening, we'd have the data. The fact that we don't, well, that's presented as the second major piece of evidence that the theory has collapsed. Okay, so after laying out this case for why evolution fails as a science, the source makes a really fascinating pivot. It basically says, let's reframe this whole conversation. Let's stop talking about evolution as science and start talking about it as a belief. And you can see here how the source basically creates two different boxes for evolution. In one box, it's a scientific claim, and according to them, that box is empty, it's collapsed. But then they open up the second box, matter of belief, and in this context, it's totally okay. The lack of evidence doesn't matter anymore, because now it's all about faith, not proof. The author then makes this comparison super explicit. They put believing in evolution right alongside other forms of worship or spiritual belief. The argument is basically, look, if people can worship fire or cows or insects, then what's the problem of someone choosing to believe in evolution? It's just framed as another option on the belief menu. So this reframing move, it's not just about putting evolution in a new category. It's much bigger than that. It sets up what the author presents as two totally distinct, competing worldviews. Two completely different ways of understanding where we all came from. And the text draws a very clear line in the sand. On one side, you have a creation-based system, which it says is rooted in the Quran. And on the other side, you have an evolution-based system credited to Darwin. And, importantly, the author frames both of these as systems of faith. So this is what the source calls the essence of the matter. It all boils down to this. The choice, as they present it, isn't really about science versus religion. It's about faith versus faith. Are you going to put your faith in a creation-based system, or are you going to put your faith in an evolution-based one? And while the author does say, hey, you're free to believe what you want, they end with a pretty stark warning that every belief carries consequences. And that really leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? The text we've just walked through has its own very clear idea of what makes a scientific theory fail. But it forces us to ask something bigger. What actually is the line between a scientific theory and a belief system? And maybe even more importantly, who gets to decide where that line is drawn?